compassion shape your life? And for this one, maybe we can start with Rawane.
Hi. How does thinking about compassion shape my life? I'm still thinking of everything you put into my head now. It's so powerful. I'm so happy you spoke about that, actually. I feel that, so again, since I'm fighting with the concept of compassion, the way I was thinking of compassion more was, once I understand that we're all in this together, we're all in the same boat, what you're feeling will be something that I might be feeling one day. It would be also realizing that whatever I'm doing out of compassion is a social responsibility. So as a global citizen, it's my responsibility to do that. It's not a right, it's not a given. It's not because I'm better, it's not because I have to. It's just because whatever I'm gonna do right now is gonna actually affect me at some point. And we see that in the trade. We see that in the North-South relationship. We see that in the fact that we have finite resources, and at some point, if I'm consuming a lot, somebody else is not being able to have water or electricity. If I keep using all the plastic is at some point going in the ocean to Africa. So we are affecting each other. We cannot keep closing our views. So the way I view, I think compassion shaped my life is a tiny bit more political, where, for example, I boycott. I boycott organizations that have sweatshops. I try to not have a logo. I try to always listen to different positions of different people. And I think that all of this is coming from a sense of love. And often when you say I boycott, people think that you're always angry. It's like you're the activist who just want to say no. But most of the time it's not. It's you're just being responsible of every action, knowing that we are in this together again, and that every action that I'm doing is affecting me. It's a bit of like, I don't know, an intellectual karma, I find. One quote also that I was thinking of was of Leela Watson. If you have come here to help me, you are wasting our time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. So it's again the fact of cooperation and dialogue, and that can only come through compassion. Another thing that I was thinking of is, if we're doing our work out of compassion, that doesn't mean our work is good. It's just the fuel to this work. So that's why, for example, having put you in an orphanage that is only white came from a concept of compassion. That doesn't mean it's going to be better for you, but that doesn't discredit also the fact that that person thought maybe that at some point that was the best thing to do. So sometimes using compassion always as an excuse to justify a lot of development work that went the other way, or a lot of practices that at the end we realize were racist or demeaning, just saying I did it because I have a big heart and I want to help you is not going to make it any better or any worse. It's just something, it's a personal thing, I find, and a personal responsibility.
Thank you, Rawane. Deborah, would you like to share, please?
Sure, thanks. As you can imagine, the project that we did around those videos called Reclaiming Language changed how I think about compassion, and the conversations that had to happen in order for those words to be shared taught me that words aren't neutral and that they can cause harm. And I've also learned that when I hear somebody talking about compassion, I often wait to see what their actions are, because I don't think that simply claiming compassion or that an act is compassion really illustrates the meaning necessarily intended, and actions often show more clearly what it is that people are intending to do. So for me, where I go with compassion is to a place of humility. For me, being compassionate requires us to sit or stand alongside of another with humility, and that takes us recognizing that we need to take action, but only when and in a way that the person we're sitting with, we're being in solidarity with, is comfortable. And to go back to Devi's example, right? He may not have been comfortable. I don't know your story, but the people that in the video that I showed are not comfortable with having their lives painted as full of suffering and as being vulnerable. Those aren't acts of words of compassion. Those are words of creating vulnerability and powerlessness. And so I think a big piece of it is not taking action, especially for those of us who are in privileged positions. You know, I'm white. I'm a extremely well-educated woman. I have a high income. I live in the global north. English is my first language. My body looks to most people as if it's not disabled. You know, I embody a lot of privilege, and I have the tools of my trade as a professor. That gives me a lot of clout. So for me, compassion often means shutting up, stepping aside, moving out of the way, creating a space for somebody else to act or to take the lead or be in front. It often means not being visible. And that for me is partly political work as an ally, but it's also in my day-to-day life. So on Friday we had an event that brought a bunch of people talking about how to make the Mount a more inclusive and accessible place. And we had a buffet lunch. Buffet lunches aren't so good for everybody because they require a certain amount of balance and things like that. Well, one of the practices that I've learned is that it's not enough just to say, you know, just let us know what you need. So one of the acts of solidarity and compassion for me is to offer to be a plate carrier. To carry somebody's plate through the lineup. And they don't have to take me up on it, but I put forward the offer, I give something concrete, and I'm flexible, but I don't need to be the focus of the relationship or the act. So for me, it's that stepping aside and given my own privilege and place to that place of humility, listening, and honoring the differences.
So I had to think about this question for a while before I came up with something about how compassion shapes my life. I'm just going to give you an example of how I saw compassion beginning to work in my life in the hospital that I was working at in Kenya. I was in a 1-month placement in a rural hospital. And my first 2 weeks had gone really great. I had been working with mothers and children, weighing and measuring babies, and then giving nutritional supplements. And the second week had been just nutritional counseling, where I was able to observe and listen to the other nutritionists because it was mostly in Kiswahili, so it was mostly observation. But I felt like I had been learning so much. And then in my third week, I was placed in the wards, and the wards is where all the general cases are. So whether it's a burn victim or someone who's broken something or just an array of different illnesses and diseases. And our department is really important there because we do bedside counseling and we talk to the families in there about what food they need to bring to the person that's sick or at the hospital, because there's no food given in the hospital. Everything is brought from back home. So my first day in the wards, I was just really overwhelmed by the whole environment. The smell was really overpowering. It was just a mixture of urine and bleach. And it was really packed that week. There were 2 people in most of the beds, so it was just really squished. And a lot of the cases we were seeing, I felt like we weren't really able to help them with what they were going through. There was one lady who she needed to have an NG tube, but the hospital didn't have it available to her, and they weren't able to move her to private care because her family didn't have the money for it. And I felt throughout the week that there was just so many people that we weren't really able to help and that we weren't assisting with nutrition in any way. And I was getting really frustrated by the situation, and I was feeling sorry for the people that I was seeing, and I could really feel myself withdrawing from everyone that was around me, I felt myself withdrawing from the patients and from the other staff. And halfway through the week, the other intern who was with me, she asked me what was wrong. She said I looked so sad. And when she said that, I realized how I must look to the patients, because I was a completely healthy person. I wasn't going through anything. I wasn't sick in any way. And they must be wondering why I was looking like I was. So that week, I really tried to be cheerful. After that happened, I tried to greet people in Kiswahili. I'm not very good with languages, but I really tried to make that extra effort. I went to the maternity area and I helped mothers with breastfeeding, because that's something that I'm really passionate about, and that makes me feel relaxed and calm. So I guess from that video about feeling pity for someone, that's not what compassion is. Compassion goes beyond yourself so much. You have to see the person's situation, what they're going through, and it doesn't really have anything to do with you. So that's something that I have to actively work on, and I think that's how compassion shapes my life and how it will continue to do so.
Thank you, Yvette. Debbie?
So I get the privilege of sort of following after everybody has spoken, so I just take bits and pieces and put it all together. So the first thing that sort of struck me when I was thinking about the question, which is, how does thinking about compassion shape my life? And I guess the first thing that I always center when I start to think about this, taking Yvette, the distinction that you're making, and in response to the video as well, is to pose the question, and I speak a lot with my students in the Child and Youth Care Studies program, and sometimes in education as well, is that, how do we matter to each other, right? And so when I'm sort of working with students, I pose the question and saying, if you're working with a youth, right, there's a sense in you that you want this youth to have a sense of mattering. And so the question should be from you, how does this youth matter to me? And it's like, which ties into action. What am I doing that demonstrates to this particular person in front of me that they matter to me? And I think this idea of a dialectic engagement has to occur, because you could be doing the things, it's about how the person then responds back to the act of what you're doing. And if I go back to the question of the orphanage, there's this idea that with this idea of, how do you matter to me comes with a great deal of responsibility. So I think compassion comes with a great deal of responsibility, right? That in the moment I pose the question of how do you matter to me, and I start to ask, well, what is the evidence of me trying to investigate how you matter, of me trying to demonstrate how you matter, that I'm actively questioning myself, am I trying to collapse your diversity to a singularity that matters to me? And I think that's a fundamentally different way of looking at compassion, because it always keeps us questioning, right? Because if you think about it as a two-way process, the minute I begin to demonstrate that I care for you, there is a response that either affirms that or disaffirms that, and either can make you want to step away or want to step closer. And then we have to investigate that. Like, what's making this supposed encounter of compassion, of caring, materialize? Is it because the person is conforming to my way of being, or is it that we're actually mattering to each other in new ways? And so I think for me as the individual, it's about centering social justice, right? And that means that, valuing diversity and trying to figure out, is this what is in the best interest of that person? And how do I know that? And so if you think about it from that way, it's also about opening up spaces, right? That if you're compassionate and you care for others, then you open up spaces. And when we open up spaces, we also create a space that says, I'm willing to learn from you. I'm willing to be educated, and that I need to make time and space and energy so that you can teach me the world. And that care comes really from us being genuine and saying that there's a way of being in the world that matters to you, and because it matters to you, it matters to me too.